Very good afternoon, and dear participants and the resource person. We'll start the today's session with a silent prayer. Once again, very good afternoon, dear participants and respected resource person. Today we are having Dr. John Pratip Kumar sir as our resource person. Sir has completed MBA and PhD in finance and accounting area. Sir is expert in finance and accounting area. Sir is having 9 years of teaching experience and 3 years of industry experience. And Sir has published 10 papers in reputed journals. So today we are going to have a wonderful session from Dr. John Pratip sir. So we are waiting for that. Over to you, sir. You can start.
Yeah, thank you very much, Aribhaskar sir.
Yes, sir. You can start, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon once again to Aribhaskar sir and all the dear participants. So I'm very much glad to join with you all for this UGC NET orientation for 2020 examination. So I first of all I want to congratulate all of you for making your mind to crack the NET exam and be qualified with the NET exam, which is very much mandatory now for all the faculties who want to be in the higher education system. So once again, I want to congratulate everyone. And straight away, we will go to the topic because we have very less time. So I'll be dealing, as you know, the accounting and finance part. That is our unit 4, unit 4 in the syllabus. I think everybody knows the syllabus, so I'll not go through it. I'll be touching actually the important topics. I'll be touching the important topics, and then I'll not be going in depth because of time constraint. And end of if everything is over, then we will take up the question answer. I have brought some previous year question papers, so we will try to solve from there. And then any queries from the participants, you can ask me. Okay, is it okay? That's how I have planned the session. If you have any doubt or any clarification, if you require, you can please put in the chat box. I'll be monitoring the chat box also simultaneously. So please put your queries or any doubts in the chat box. I'll take up the queries in the end of the session. Okay. So thank you very much. Okay. Start after 2 minutes. Okay. Then we will wait. Okay. Then we will wait for 2 minutes. Then we will start. Till then, you can just go through the syllabus. All of you are joined already. Please go through the syllabus. Okay, so we will start the session now. So this is the syllabus. I think you're already familiar with the syllabus. Okay. So all of you know, first topic is principles and standards of accounting. All of you know that GAP is one of the important authoritative standards set by the policy boards and most preferred ways of recording and reporting the financial statements like balance sheet, income statement. Okay. And then classification of assets and liabilities and treatment of different incomes and expenses. And now we know that Indian GAAP is being merged with the IFRS to bring the familiarity and to bring the equality in all the standards what we are following in India and even in the global level. To match with the global level, we've already merged with the IFRS, okay, International Financial Reporting Standards. And accounting standards is very important for all the accountants who are involved in preparation of books of accounts and presentation of the financial data. Okay. So what is accounting principle? You know, these are nothing but the rules of action adopted by the accountants globally. And there are different names for that. Sometimes it is called as principles, sometimes they called as postulates, concepts, conventions, doctrines, okay, and etc. Assumptions. Okay. So these principles we find the accounting concepts and accounting convention. So the term accounting concept, all of you know, it is nothing but the accounting postulates and necessary assumption ideas which you can find there. So these are the 11 concepts what normally you might have come across in your studies when you are doing your masters or when you are teaching, if you are teaching. Okay. Separate entity concept, going concern concept, money measurement concept, cost concept, accounting period concept, dual aspect concept, matching concept, realization, balance sheet equation concept, verification and objective, evidence concept, and accrual concept. Okay. Then accounting conventions, as you know, these are nothing but these are the customs and it's designed to help the accountants to overcome the practical problems that arise out of the preparation of financial statements. Okay, so these conventions are very useful. These are nothing but these are the customs which they have been following from many years. So these are the very important 4 conventions. That is convention of disclosure, convention of materiality, convention of consistency, convention of conservatism. Okay, I'm not going to explain everything because you already know that. So which wherever I feel it's important, I'll explain. So introduction to financial statements. All of you know financial statement nothing but these are the formal record of financial activities of an entity. This shows your financial strength, performance and liquidity of the company, and they reflect the effectiveness of the business transactions and the events on the entity. And these are the main 4 important statements what we come across. Statement of financial position, nothing but your balance sheet. Then financial statement of the performance of the company, that is income statement. Then it's also called as profit and loss account. Then cash flow statement and supplementary notes. So statement of financial position, you already know, it is also called as balance sheet, which is prepared by assets, liabilities, and the equity. Nothing but your capital. That capital can be made up of equity capital or other capital also like preference share, okay, and other liabilities, long-term and short-term liabilities. This is the format, general format what you come across: equity share capital, then preference share capital, then the current liability and the long-term liabilities. And the asset side, you find the tangible and intangible assets. That is nothing but non-current accounts, or the fixed assets. Normally we call them. Then the current assets. Okay. Then as you all know that balance sheet has to tally. That means your left hand side should be equal to the right hand side. Then income statement. Income statement is actually called as the company's financial performance. How the company is performing. For example, if I want to know how a particular student is performing in one academic year, how will I come to know? By looking at the marks card. So I personally named this as the marks card for the company, the score sheet of the company. So how they have performed in one financial year, and that is what is the performance can be profit or loss. Okay, so this is prepared by using incomes, all the revenues, okay, direct and indirect revenues, and the expenses, operating expenses and non-operating expenses. Then when you minus income from the expenses, you will get the net profit or the loss. This is a general format of trading and profit and loss account. Okay, and then cash flow statement. All of you know what is cash flow statement. Cash flow statement is nothing but it will show the movement of cash in the company and out of the company, with the cash inflow and cash outflow for during a period of time for which you are preparing. And cash flow statement is mainly prepared by three activities. One is called operating activities, which represents your the primary activity of the business, like cash sales, cash purchases, okay, the payment to debtors, sorry, payment to the creditors and payment received by debtors, royalties and salaries paid, taxes paid, all those. And then investing activity, where you talk about when the company is purchasing any assets or when the company is selling the assets. Maybe that can be the fixed assets or it can be even the investment assets. And second is your financing activity. Here we will record only those cash flows where you are either receiving or you are paying out, mainly for financing your company. Okay, so for example, when you are issuing equity share, okay, to finance your company, so when you issue, it will be a cash inflow. When you are going to repay the when you are redeeming your when you are redeeming or when you are buying back your equity share, then it becomes cash outflow. Okay, like this when you are issuing debenture, when you are redeeming debenture, all those things comes under your financing activity. Then financial statement analysis. Okay, so after preparing the financial statement, the next step is you need to analyze those financial statements. And when you analyze, you are going to actually analyze the relationship among the various important financial factors of a business, which is disclosed in a statement. It can be a balance sheet, it can be the income statement or the cash flow. Okay, so there are different types of analysis. One is called internal, external. When it is done by the internal people for their company, it is called internal. And when it's done for the external people, it is called external analysis. And then horizontal, when it is done, okay, if you're doing for more than 1 year, it is called a horizontal, where we compare the statement what you prepare is called as comparative statement and trend percentages. Then we have vertical analysis, where you're only for 1 year, but will be comparing only the what is called common statement, or it is called common size percentages. Okay, and then the financial ratios, the various financial ratios we use for calculation. Then significance and purpose of financial statement analysis. Why we need to do this? One is to judge the efficiency, then judge the liquidity, then judge the solvency, and judging the efficiency of the management. And then inter-firm comparison. You want to compare the different firm in the same industry, whether you are better than them or you are inferior to them. Then forecasting and budgeting. Okay, so these are the important significance or purpose of financial statements. Then the tools used here to do the analysis is comparative statement, then common size, trend percentages, and financial ratios, as I said earlier. So first we'll take up financial ratios. Financial ratios, there are so many financial ratios. You can refer any textbook, any accounting textbook or any finance textbook, you will easily get all the ratios. I'm not going to discuss all the ratios. So I just want to tell you one small tip to clear the exam. Please go through all the ratios and then try to understand the concept behind each ratio. So each ratio is designed for one particular concept. For example, debt equity ratio. When you see debt equity ratio, it will tell you that how much equity you have to repay the debt. For example, it is 2:1. That means for every 2 debt, you have 1 equity. Okay, so that is debt equity ratio. And what is its significance, and try to learn what are these problems directly which are used in the which have come across in the financial ratios. Okay, that will do it in the end. We'll do it in the end of the session. Then fund flow analysis, where you're going to analyze your fund flow statement. You know already what is fund flow. Fund flow is nothing but it denotes the working capital and the flow of means of movement and changes in the working capital. And when there is a fund flow, when we say there is a fund flow, only when there are in a transaction, there are one is a current account, another is a non-current account. Are you getting it? So current account is nothing but your fixed assets and fixed liabilities, and non-current is current assets and current liability. In one transaction, if there are one account is a current, one is another current account, then only there will be a flow of fund. If there is only current account and another account is also current account, then there is no flow of fund. And again, if there is current and non-current, then there is a flow of fund. If both are non-current, still there is no flow of fund. Both are current, still there will not be any flow of fund. Okay, I'll just show you one table here. You can see there the sources and application of fund. Okay, so when there is an inflow, when there is an outflow. Inflow we call them as sources, outflow we call them as applications. Okay, so when there is a flow of fund, one is trading profit or the funds provided by the operation, that is inflow. If there is a loss in your trade, then it is a outflow. Issue of equity share debenture is inflow. Redemption of preference shares is an outflow. Okay, every issue it is inflow, when you are redeeming it is outflow. Similarly for debenture also, issue is inflow, redemption is outflow. Long-term loan, when you are borrowing, it is inflow. When you are repaying the long-term loan, it is an outflow. Then fixed assets, it's again when you are selling fixed assets, you get an inflow. When you purchase a fixed asset, it is an outflow. And sale of investment, when you are selling your investment, okay, then it is inflow. When you are purchasing, it will be outflow. Then non-trading incomes like dividend, if you are receiving, it is income. And when you are paying the dividends or other interest, it is called as non-trading items. When you are paying, it will be outflow. Okay, let's see one example here. Whether you should tell me, you can type in the chat box in each of the transaction whether there is a flow of fund or not. Okay, if it is there, then tell me whether the working capital is going to increase or decrease. Okay, so the first one is the company is issuing 80,000 shares of rupees 20 each at par and fully paid up. Now tell me whether there is a flow of fund. If yes, what is happening to the working capital? Whether working capital is increasing or decreasing. First transaction, can you read? I request all the participants, please put your answer in the chat box. Increasing. Okay, that is working capital is increasing. Very good, sir. Why it is increasing? Can you please tell me, Charu ma'am? The company is issuing 80,000 shares of rupees 20 each at par and it is fully paid up. Is issuing, yes. So what are the different two accounts involved here? One is equity share. Equity share is what? Non-current. And you have fully paid up means you are getting the cash. The cash is what? Current. So when there is a non-current and current, there is a flow of fund. Yes, there is an increase in working capital. Okay, any doubt? Anybody has any doubt? Or else we'll go to the second one. Second one, debentures of rupees 10,000, 10 lakhs are converted into equity share. Now please tell me whether there is a flow of fund or no. They are converting debenture into equity shares. Whether there will be a flow of fund. Dear participant, please put your answer in the chat box. There is no flow of fund. Answer is correct, but what is the reason? Can someone tell me what is the reason? No flow of fund. Why? Yeah, because both are non-current. Debenture is you're converting, which is debenture is converting in, okay, converting and new issues are done. Okay, yeah, he is converting debenture, which is a non-current. They're converting into equity. Equity also non-current. When there are both are non-current, there is no flow of fund and there is no effect on the working capital. Then last third one, machinery were purchased for 5,60,000. Now tell me, what is the answer? Decrease is correct. Why there is a decrease? Because you are purchasing machinery, and machinery is what? Non-current, and you're purchasing by giving cash. Cash is a current. So again, there is a flow of fund, but there will be a decrease in working capital because cash is going out. Last one, cash paid to creditors. Will there be a flow of fund? Cash paid to credit, decrease in working capital is the wrong answer. Other participants, please participate. It may be wrong answer, no problem. Please feel free to answer. Yeah. Yes. There will not be decrease, there will not be increase because there is no flow of fund. Because cash is what? Cash is current account. Creditor is what? That is also current account. So when both are current account, as I said in the beginning, there is no flow of fund. Okay. So please go through this. You can refer any of the book or you can refer Aurora book. Mainly it is very good. Nicely has given about the fund flows. Okay. Next one, fund flow is done. Now we'll go to the cash flow analysis. So what do you know? What do you mean by cash flow? Nothing but it is we'll be evaluating the company's cash inflow and outflow from the operations and financing and investing activity. So we prepare using operating activities, financing activity, and the investing activity of the company. And this analysis is done mainly for investors and business to determine the value of overall company as well as the individual branches of large companies by looking at how much excess cash they produce. If they produce excess cash, it is not good to the company because it will make my company, the cash will become idle cash, and the idle cash is nothing but it is unproductive. You're not getting any gain out of that. Okay. The next one, DuPont analysis. What is DuPont analysis? Nothing but it's a extended examination of return on equity. Return on equity of a company which analyzes net profit margin, then asset turnover, and the financial leverage. Okay, this analysis was developed by the DuPont Corporation in the year 1920. Please remember all the dates because in the exam they'll ask you dates also. And DuPont analysis is simply breaking down the return on equity as I said earlier. So how do you calculate return on equity here in DuPont analysis? One is net profit margin. The formula is net income divided by sales, then assets turnover ratio, sales divided by total assets, then financial leverage, total assets divided by total equity. And the company can increase in its return on equity, okay, if it generates high net profit margin, and if it uses its asset to generate more sales. Okay, they have asset like machinery they have, so that you use that machinery to sell more, okay, increase more sales. Then as a high financial leverage. What is high financial leverage? Having more debt in the company's financial capital structure, but they have to make use of that very efficiently. Then components of DuPont analysis, one is profit margin. As I said, they have to increase the profit margin. Then what happens? When you increase your profit margin, it will increase your return on equity. Okay. So to maintain the healthy profit margin and drive ways to grow, okay, is by reducing the, how do you increase net profit? By reducing the expenses, increasing the price of your products and services, what you are selling. It will definitely impact your return on equity. Okay, that's what you can see there. Net profit margin. I just showed an example where a company is having X company having annual profits of 1,000 and annual turnover is 10,000. So how to calculate net profit? That is net profit divided by total revenue. There's nothing but total sales. Net profit is 1,000 and annual turnover is 10,000. When you divide, you'll get 10%. Efficiency of the company using its assets. Okay, how they're using the assets of the company, and this calculated by dividing revenues by the average assets. And this ratio differs across industries, so they need to be very careful when they are comparing with their company or another company. If they want to compare, they have to compare with the company which is there in the same industry. If the company assets turnover increases, this positively impacts the return on equity of the company. So this has to increase. So for example, you can see company X has revenue of rupees 10,000 and the average assets is rupees 200. So what will be the asset turnover? Revenue is divided by average assets. Revenue is 1,000. Sorry, it is 10,000 divided by 200. So how much will get? Can you put in the chat box? 10,000 divided by 200. How much? How much you'll get? Just you add 1 0. Okay. Next one, financial leverage. This refers to the debt usage of the finance in the company. Okay. So how are they using the debt? And it has to be used to finance the operations and growth of the company. And however, excess leverage will also push up the ROE, can turn out the detrimental of the health of the company. Okay. So excess debt is also not good to the company. So how do you calculate this? That is average asset divided by average equity. Okay, you can calculate that. And what are the drawbacks of limitations of DuPont analysis? This analysis uses accounting data from the financial statements in its analysis, which can be manipulated by the management to hide the discrepancies. So management can always manipulate, they can do window dressing of the financial statements, then it cannot get a accurate analysis and the result will not be wrong. It will be wrong. It is only useful for comparing between the companies in the same industry. You cannot compare the company from other industry. Okay. So there are 3 steps for calculating DuPont analysis. That is ROE, that is net income. You can take the 3 steps. One is calculation net income. Okay, that is a profit margin, then total asset turnover and equity manipulator. Sorry, multiplier. Okay, you can use these 3. There's one more there where you can use the 5 ratios. One is that is called tax burden, that is net income divided by pre-tax income. Next, asset turnover, that is net sales divided by total asset. Then equity multiplier, that is nothing but your total assets divided by total equity. Then interest burden, pre-tax income and EBIT. Then operating margin, EBIT divided by sales. Here you will be using 5 ratios to calculate. So you can use 3 or you can use 5 also. These are different 5 components you can use to zero debt company. That means because even if you're using 3 components, what is one more thing? You should have actually debt. If you don't have debt, you cannot calculate the equity multiplier. You cannot calculate if debt is not there. Okay. Then what happens? You can use that. Can we not use that? That's the answer. The answer is yes. If the company which is zero, that means the real equity, then this company what they do in the above formula remain the same with just one exception. The financial Yeah, sorry, participants, for the fluctuation in the internet connectivity. I lost the connectivity. Yeah, so we were discussing, can we use the DuPont analysis when the company is having zero debt? The answer is yes, we can use, but only thing in the formula, when you're using financial ratio component, you have to take it as 1 and the remaining things will be same. Okay, so please remember all this because these kind of things only they'll ask in the net exam. And preparation of cost sheet. So that is the next topic. You already know what is cost sheet. Cost sheet will tell you the total cost component of producing or rendering a service. So how do you prepare cost sheet? All of you know that, but anyways, I'll just take you through. So first you have to calculate prime cost. How do you calculate prime cost? We will be calculating by adding direct material, direct labor and direct expense. Then after that, when you next you have to calculate works cost, that is prime cost. Okay, then you have to add factory or indirect expenses, factory overheads you need to add. And then how to calculate cost of production? Works cost, that is nothing but factory cost plus office and administration expenses. When I add, I'll get the cost of production. Then how to calculate total cost, cost of production plus selling and distribution expenses when I add, nothing but your sales expenses when you add, will get the total cost. And how to calculate profit? Sales minus total cost. This is the format taken from the Aurora book. I don't know whether it is you're visible. Is it visible or able to see? You can see there opening stock of raw material, then add purchases, expense on purchase, closing stock of raw material, then get the cost of materials consumed. Then to this, when you add direct wages and expenses, you'll get the prime cost. Then you add factory overhead, then opening stock of work in progress, then closing stock of work in progress. You have to minus from that. You'll get the factory cost or works cost. Then to this, you add administration overhead. Then you get cost of production. Then you add opening stock of finished goods and deduct the closing stock of finished goods. You'll get the cost of goods sold. And to this, you have to add the any selling and distribution expenses they have. After adding this, you'll get the cost of sales. Okay, this cost sheet you have to remember because you may get questions on this. And then cost sheet, when you add profit margin, you'll get the sales or selling price. And why cost sheet is used? Mainly to calculate the selling price. And cost sheet is also used to prepare the quotations. When the tenders are called, they use this event to prepare the quotations. Quotation nothing but estimated cost sheet. Okay, you can prepare estimated cost sheet also from this. Okay, and you can refer any other textbook. You will get the full the format of each and everything. What all comes under factory overhead, what all comes under administration overhead, all that please go through it. At least once you please go through it before the exam. It will help you in the exam. Then marginal costing. We will go to the next topic. Marginal costing. You know there are very important two costing types. One is absorption costing and marginal costing. In absorption costing, we will take the total cost. We will consider the total cost. That is nothing but fixed cost as well as variable cost. And whereas in marginal costing, we will take only the variable cost. Okay, only variable costs are charged to the cost units. And what about the fixed cost? We will take them to the, we consider it as a period cost and will directly write down in the profit and loss account. Okay, that is called marginal costing. One more name for marginal costing is also called as variable costing. Okay, and CVP analysis is one of the very is a marginal costing or variable costing. Yeah, sorry, participant. I'm facing a lot of fluctuation in the network. Yeah. So CVP analysis, as I was telling, it will study the interrelationship between these three important factors. Okay. And it will help you to find out the impact on the profit when you do the changes in selling price or the changes in the volume of sales or variable cost if you're changing or fixed cost you're changing, it will impact the profit. You can refer any textbook you will get a small problems. Please go through that. Then break-even analysis is also one of the widely used technique to study the CVP relationship, cost, volume, and profit relationship. And all of you know what is break-even analysis, what is break-even point. So break-even point is nothing but it's a point where the total revenue is equal to the total cost. That means there is no profit, no loss situation. And one more broader way of break-even analysis, nothing but break-even point or break-even analysis, nothing but will tell you probable profit or loss, what you can earn when the given number of sales or production is given. Okay, or the amount of volume of sales you need to earn to get the desired profit. You need to sell to get the desired profit. Okay, so what is the formula for break-even point? Break-even point, when you're calculating, first you need to calculate contribution. So contribution, how do you calculate contribution? I think you know the flow of income statement, right? So one is sales or revenue. From that you deduct variable cost, you'll get contribution. From variable cost, from contribution, if you minus fixed cost, you'll get the profit. Got it? At least this income statement, please keep it in mind. So contribution will get when you minus the from sales. If you minus variable cost, you'll get contribution. So there are different ways of calculating contribution. One is sales minus variable cost. Second, you can do it in reverse way. From profit, when you add back fixed cost, you will get the contribution. Or you can even calculate profit by using this equation. Profit is equal to contribution minus fixed cost, will get the profit. Or you can even calculate when it is loss also. If it is loss, it will be fixed cost minus loss. You'll get contribution. So PV ratio, what is the formula? Very simple, contribution divided by sales. Please remember this formula, contribution divided by sales. So how do you calculate contribution? Selling price minus variable cost per unit divided by selling price, you'll get the PV ratio. And break-even point, how to calculate? You can calculate break-even in terms of rupees, you can calculate in terms of units. Units, if you want to calculate, is fixed cost divided by contribution. Fixed cost divided by contribution per unit. Please remember this, it is per unit. And then if you want to calculate in rupees, it is total cost, total fixed cost divided by contribution into sales. Nothing but here it is same like your units formula only. Only thing you have to multiply by sales. And one more formula is there where you can use PV ratio concept. That is nothing but total fixed cost divided by PV ratio will give you the break-even point in rupees. Additional calculations also you can do it. One is calculation of profit at different sales volume. Okay. And when the different sales volume is given, say for example, 1 lakh is the sales volume, what will be my probable profit you can calculate. Or if sales is desired profit is given, but sales you can calculate how much should I sell to get my desired profit. Or it can be missing figures you can find out from the data. Okay. And then one more topic we come across in BP is margin of safety. Margin of safety may be defined as the difference between actual sales and sales at the break-even point. So I'll just show you this in the graph. Now the formula is actual sales minus break-even point. You can even calculate in units also. Profit divided by break-even PV ratio, or profit divided by contribution per unit. If you do, you will get the margin of safety in units. Okay. You can see here the break-even point is how many units? 100 units is you can see the x-axis, 100 units is break-even point. And their actual sales is 150. Actual sales is 150. So when you minus here actual sales minus break-even sales, you will get the margin of safety. So 150 minus 100 is 50. And this particular area is called as margin of safety. And what is the margin of safety? More the margin of safety is better for the company. Okay. And if it is a very small company, if the margin of safety is even coming down by 1% or 5%, then they have to be very careful, because any moment they may fall to loss region. Okay. That's why they should always maintain the margin of safety. Hope it's clear. Any doubt till now? Dear participants, are you okay? Any doubt, anything you want to ask? Yeah. So definition of standard cost. Yeah, thank you. Please let me know if you have any doubts or anything you want to ask. So standard cost, you all of you know, standard cost is nothing but the predetermined cost which is been calculated based on some technical estimates, okay, for material, labor and overhead for selected period of time for prescribed set of working conditions. And what is standard costing? Nothing but it's a uh, process where you apply the standard cost which is prepared to measure the variations from actual cost and analyzing the course of variation with view of maintaining maximum efficiency in the production. So here you are going to prepare the standard cost and then you're going to compare the standard cost with the actual cost, and when you minus that you'll get the variance. Okay, so that is what we are going to do. That is called as standard costing. Okay, and what is the procedure? One is first to prepare the standard for each operation, then compare with the actual with the standard performance, and you'll get a variance, and then you analyze this and variance and you have to report to the management why it is happening, and then take the necessary step to avoid these variances. Okay, so there are different kinds of variances. I'll just quickly go through that. Cost variance, where you are going to calculate the difference between the standard cost and the actual cost. Okay, and we normally, when you do analysis of variances, you come across two types of variances. One is called favorable variance or credit variance, that will show as a positive symbol. And second thing, it will be unfavorable or adverse or debit variance, that we called as a negative symbol. When you calculate standard and actual, for example, if you're minusing that, if you get positive answer, that is favorable. If you get negative answer, then it is unfavorable. For example, standard is 100 rupees and your actual cost you are spending to manufacture a product is say 120. So when you minus 100 minus 120, what do you get? You get minus 20. That means minus 20 means it is unfavorable. It is an unfavorable variance. Yeah. Okay. So you may get positive or negative. If it is positive, it is favorable. That means when your actual cost is less than the standard, it is called favorable. When your actual cost is more than the standard, it is called unfavorable. Okay. Please remember this thing in mind. So there are normally we come across three types of variances. One is called material variance, labor variance, and overhead variances. So normally these are the classification you can see. Material variance, we have material price variance, then material usage variance. Under material usage variance, again, we come across two types of variances, that is called material mix variance and material yield variance. Similarly, labor cost variances, we have labor rate variances and labor efficiency variances. In a labor efficiency variances, we are again subdivided into labor mix variance, idle time variance, and labor yield variance. Then overhead cost variances, we have two classification. One is called variable overhead cost variance and fixed overhead cost variance. So variable fixed cost variance, we have expenditure or budget variance and efficiency variance. And fixed cost overhead variances, we come across expenditure or budget variance and volume variance. Again, volume variance, we have three subdivisions: efficiency variance, capacity variance, and calendar variances. Okay. So all these variances have the formulas. Please go through all the formulas anyways. Okay. And try to understand the reasons for the variance. Variance is nothing but your actual cost and we are comparing the actual cost and the standard cost, and your standard cost, your actual cost can be more than the standard cost or it can be less than the standard cost. Why it is happening, we have to understand. So you can refer any textbook of accounting, you can find out this. Refer the management accounting textbook, you will get this. Okay, so material variances, why these material variances come across? One is when there is a change in the base price of the material what you're purchasing, or fail to purchase the anticipated standard quantity at an appropriate price, you may delay in the purchases. So what happened? The price increase. Then when the price increase, when you do actual purchase, you are paying at a higher than the standard price. So what happens? You will get a unfavorable variance. Then use of substandard material and ineffective use of material and pilferage when there is a very small quantity of theft happening in the company. Okay, these are the reasons which will lead to the material variances. Like this, you have to study why the reasons for the labor variance and overhead variance also. Okay, so standard material cost variance, the formula is standard cost minus actual cost. Okay, and then material price variance, standard price minus actual price into actual quantity. Then material usage variance, standard quantity minus actual quantity into standard price. Material mix variances, it is nothing but reverse standard quantity minus actual quantity into standard price. Reverse quantity you have to calculate separately. The formula is standard quantity of one material divided by total of standard quantity of all materials into total of quantity of all materials. And then usage variance, standard quantity minus reverse standard quantity into standard price. And then material yield variance, nothing but actual yield minus standard yield into a standard cost of output for a given output. You can calculate standard material cost per unit of output. Okay, and labor variances, which is analysis and computation of labor variances, is quite similar to the material variances. Almost formulas will be same. One thing here where you see the quantity, you'll be using the hours, now standard hours and the actual hours. And reasons for labor variances: change in design and quality, then poor working conditions, improper scheduling, improper placement of labor, increments, high labor wages, and overtime. You can find again in this subdivisions, labor cost variance, again standard cost minus actual cost of labor. And here then labor rate variances. Earlier we had material price variance, now it is labor rate variance. Only difference is here we are not using quantity, you are using standard rate. Same formulas, you just substitute as standard rate, you will get all the formulas will change. Okay, standard rate minus actual rate into actual hours. And here labor efficiency variance, standard hours minus actual hours into standard rate. So what you can see here, the formula, earlier we are using standard quantity minus actual quantity into standard rate. Standard rate is constant same here, but these two are changed. Now it is standard hours. Okay, we will be measuring standard hours and actual hours. And then idle variance is nothing but idle hours into standard rate. And please remember, idle hours will always show a negative. Why? Because idle time is nothing but it is a loss. So idle time is always an unfavorable variance. Even when you calculate, it may not get negative symbol, but still you have tried it as a negative. Okay, because it's a idle time always talks about the unfavorable situation where the employees are wasting the time. Then labor mix variance, again same, RSH minus actual quantity, actual hours into standard rate. Then labor revised efficiency variance, standard hours minus standard, revised standard hours into standard rate. The labor yield variance, actual yield minus standard yield from actual output input into standard labor cost per unit of output. Okay, clear? That is your variances. So these formulas you can find in any textbook and try to solve some problems on on those things. Okay, and even overhead variance, I didn't get the formulas. You can refer any textbook, you will get. Next one is financial management. Okay, so what is financial management? So we have finished the accounting part. Now we have come to the financial management part. So what is financial management? Financial planning is management is nothing but the operational activity of a business that is responsible for obtaining the finance and effectively utilizing the finance, okay, the necessary for efficient operation. So financial management, we have many definitions. Please go through all the definitions. It's one more definition what it says, that is planning, organizing, directing, controlling the financial activities such as procurement, utilization of funds of enterprise. It means applying general management principle to financial resources of the enterprise. So there are two main goals of financial management. One is profit maximization and wealth maximization, which I think all of you are familiar with this. So profit maximization is nothing but where you increase your profits. Okay, earlier they were thinking profit maximization is only one goal, but later they discovered this is not enough. Only earning profit is not enough. They have to even maximize the profit of the shareholders also. So please go through each goals and the drawbacks and the limitations of that. And wealth maximization is one of the very appropriate objective of an enterprise, because here you are going to talk about the value maximization. Okay, not only increasing your profit, you should even increase the value of your shareholder. The shareholder's wealth has to maximize. Okay, and here we are going to calculate NPV, and the NPV should get a positive answer. Then only you are getting a good maximization for your shareholders' wealth is maximized. Okay, so how do you measure the whether the shareholders' wealth is maximized or not? By looking at the share price. If your share price is increasing, that means you are increasing the value wealth of the shareholder, because when the share prices are increasing, so automatically your wealth of the shareholders is also increasing. So the company should try to maximum current stock price per share. They have to increase the stock price per share. When it is increasing, obviously the wealth of the shareholders will be increased. Okay, I'm not going through the detail of each and every concept. Please go through any textbook like Anand Jain or I.M. Pandey. You'll get to know more about this, or Prasanna Chandra, very good textbook. You can read more about these goals of financial management. And what are the functions of financial management? You all already are aware of. First is estimation of capital required, how much is the capital the company require. Then determining the capital composition. Okay, how we are going to create the component of the capital, whether you're going to borrow by issuing equity share, or you're borrowing by issuing debenture or bonds, or you're going to issue money market instruments and get the capital. Okay, then the choice of source of fund, then investment of fund, then disposable of the surplus fund. Whenever there is a surplus, what they do, they will dispose. How they dispose? By redeeming the, maybe redeeming debenture, redeeming the preference shares, or buyback of equity shares. That talks about the disposable. And then management of cash. Okay, you have to manage the cash very effectively, because having more cash is also a problem, having less cash also is a problem for the company. So they should also try to have the optimum level of cash. Okay, and then financial controls. They have to control the finance wherever they are using. Okay, and then there are very important functions of financial management, which involves three important decisions. One is called investment decision, financing decision, and dividend decision. Okay, so what is the investment decision? So they have to decide, when they have a capital, they have to decide what they're going to do with the capital what they earn, whether they're going to invest in fixed assets or they invest in some projects. Okay, so they have to decide. Then financing decision, where once your company started, you need to have capital, so you have to finance the company. So how will you finance? That means how will you get the finance? So either you issuing equity shares or debenture, or going for money market instruments. Okay, and then dividend decision. What is dividend decision? Once you earn the profits, so whether you're going to keep it with you or you're going to issue as a dividend to the shareholders. Okay, the company can decide. So investment decision, all I think will not go through in depth because of time constraint. So you have to invest in a very profitable projects or profitable investment they have to do, because they have to get a return which has to be more than the cost of capital. Then only that is a very good investment decision. Financing decision, they have to try to get a the finance at a minimum level, try to minimize the cost of capital. That's why they will try to use mixing the debt and equity capital. They try to mix and they try to get the minimum capital. Then dividend decision, again, there are different theories of dividend decision. Some dividend decision theory says that issuing dividend is not good for the company. It will not increase your work. It will not increase your value of the firm. Some dividend decisions say that dividend decisions are irrelevant. Whether you issue dividend or don't issue dividend, it will not affect your value of the firm. So please read the theories. One is Walter model, Gordon model, and MM approach. At least these three important models you have to read. Others also there. The traditional theories are there. Other theories are there. Please go through that. Okay. And I think this detail of dividend decision you have in the one more topic. It is a corporate finance. There you can read that. Okay. So higher percentage dividend is good for the declining firm. For the growing firm, it better they don't issue dividends more. Okay, that is your the important three decision: investment decision, financing decision, and dividend decision. Please remember, many times they ask this the question on this in the UGC NET exam. Then capital structure. What is capital structure? It refers to the how you are going to compose your capital. Whether you are going to issue equity shares or debentures, bonds, or you are going to borrow the loans, or you are going to use your internal resources like reserves and surplus. Okay. So there are different theories of capital structure. One is net income approach, then net operating income approach, traditional approach, and MM approach. I have seen many times a lot of questions asked on these approaches. Please read these approaches in detail, all the approaches, read their assumptions, read their drawbacks and the merits. Okay. So net income approach, this approach says that a firm can minimize the weighted average cost of capital and increase the value of the firm as well as market price of equity share by using debt financing to the maximum possible. Okay. So this theory is presented by Durant. He says that you can minimize your weighted average cost of capital by increasing the value of the price of your share and value of the firm by using debt. Okay, because you all know that debt is one of the cheapest way of financing your capital. Because debt financing, when you want to get the debt, the money for issuing debt security, the cost is less compared to equity. Okay, that's why they call as cheaper source of finance is debt. Okay, and net operating income approach is also again given by Durant only. And here he says that net income approach suggests that with an increase in leverage, that means debt in your capital, proportion of debt in your capital structure, the weighted average cost of capital decreases and the value of the firm increases. Okay. So here he says when you have more debt in your company, the WACC will decrease and the value of the firm increase. Okay, that is the formulas. You can see value of the firm is equal to S plus D, nothing but market value of equity and market value of debt. Okay, I now have to calculate the cost of capital, EBIT divided by V. V is nothing but S plus D. Okay, so please go through all the formulas and the abbreviations. Okay, and the net operating income approach. This theory suggests by again Durant, it is opposite to the NI approach, net income approach. According to this approach, change in capital structure of the company does not affect the market value of the firm and the overall cost of capital remains constant irrespective of the method of financing. Whether you have equity, whether you have debt or not in a capital structure, it will not affect your value of the firm and even your share price will not be affected. That means what? It implies that K naught remains the same whether the debt and equity mix is 50-50 or 20-80 or 0-100. Okay, so your cost of capital is not going to change, and thus there is no nothing as optimum capital structure, and every capital structure is a optimum capital structure in the net operating income. Okay, and again we have formula that is EBIT into 1 minus T divided by K naught. We get the value of the firm, and market value of equity is V minus D. D nothing but market value of debenture. Okay, and K naught, how do you calculate K naught? KD into D by D divided by V and KE into S divided by V. Okay, and there are different propositions he has given. Proposition 1 and proposition 2. Proposition 1 says the value of the firm depends on the earnings and business risk rather than financial risk. That means the debt. Whether you have debt or not, it doesn't matter. The main value of the firm is affected mainly based on your earnings. If you have a very good earning and if you're able to manage your business risk, then the value of the firm will increase. Okay, whether you have debt or not in your equity in your capital structure. And second proposition says that even if the firm uses more and more debt in the capital structure, the overall cost does not change even though the debt is cheaper than equity. This is because the equity shareholders increases their expectation. You may get a debt capital in a very cheaper way, but what happens? Your equity shareholders expectation will increase. So whatever you have got in the cheaper price, whatever you have done the saving, it will be nullified by the highest expectation by the equity shareholders. That means equity shareholders will expect more return. They want more premium risk return because they're taking more risk. Okay, that is why what happened? The whatever cheaper cost you are getting the debt, it will be nullified by the higher expectation from the shareholders. That is the second proposition. You can see there the financial leverage. KD is cost of debt. K naught is overall cost of capital. You can see here KE will keep increasing when you increase your debt. When debt is increasing, when debt is here, KE will be only this much. If your debt is increasing, your KE also will increase. So whatever the cheaper price you bought the debt capital will be nullified by the increasing expectation. Okay. Then how to prepare optimum capital structure in NOI approach? Here it says overall cost of capital remains the same at any level of debt. Hence the capital structure is optimum at any level of debt and equity mix. That means there is no any ideal capital structure. It can be 20% debt and 80% equity, or 50% debt, 50% equity. Any mixture you do, it is an optimum capital structure. And very important thing, one more is approach. Okay, Maud Miller approach. Here the approach says that it is also a relevant approach where he says the cost of capital and the value of the firm remains unaffected by the employee of leveraging the company. When you are using debt capital, here again he says the value of the firm will not change. Okay, and they argued that rational choice of debt and equity result in the same cost of capital under this assumption that there is no any optimum mix of debt and equity financing. It's also same like your net operating income approach. And regardless of the effect of leverage on interest rates, the equity capitalization rate will rise by an amount sufficient to offset any possible savings because of the low cost of debt. And they contend that cost of capital is equal to the capitalization rate of pure equity stream of income, and the market value is ascertained by capitalizing its expected income at the appropriate discount rate of its risk class. Okay, so again is giving more focus to the expected income. Okay, and you're going to discount this by the appropriate risk class which the company comes upon. So here he brings a very beautiful approach called as arbitrage approach. He uses arbitrage approach to prove his theory that the value of the firm will not increase or decrease, will not be affected when you use debt in the capital. Okay, so arbitrage approach, you already know what is arbitrage: buying and selling of asset in one market, buying in one market and selling in another market is called as arbitrage. And how they benefit in the arbitrage? By taking the advantage because of the difference in prices. In one market price is less, okay, another market price is more. Okay, so what are the difference you make? That is a profit, and this difference is mainly because of the price difference in two markets. Okay, and this process is essentially a balance income sold at different prices in two markets. Okay, so here you can personal leverage. What is homemade of personal leverage? Here, in terms of investing in a company which is unlevered. So what they do, they will borrow the money on their own personal interest, and they'll be investing in the market. Okay, that is called homemade or personal leverage. If the company is a unlevered firm means in this particular company they are not using any debt capital. Those are called as unlevered firm. So here he is going to tell that if the investor is investing here, so what he does, he will borrow by using his personal resources and takes a loan, personal loan, and he will be investing. That cost actually of the personal loan is it will replicate the cost of debt. Okay, that is called as homemade or personal leverage. Okay, so you can read the prepositions. It talks about the gearing, nothing but using the debt equity mix in the capital structure. The rate of return required by the shareholders increases linearly as a debt equity ratio is also increasing because the shareholders will expect more and more return. And the cutoff rate for new investment will be the K0, the overall cost of capital, and will be unaffected by the type of security used to finance the investment. Got it? That is a capital structure. So please remember what is capital structure, and please remember the different theories of capital structure. Net income approach, that is a relevant approach. Then net operating income approach, this is irrelevant. Cost of debt or the leverage is irrelevant. And then MM approach and traditional approach. Please go through that. Okay, we'll come to the one more topic, that is cost of capital. Yeah, the gearing is nothing but the amount of debt in the capital structure. See, if you have say 20% debt in your capital structure, then that is called as its gearing. That means they're using 20% debt, or it's called leverage. Okay. If it is a zero debt, then there is no gearing in the company, in the capital structure. Okay, that is called gearing. Understood, Vidya ma'am? Okay. Hope ma'am understood. So what is the cost of capital? Cost of capital of an investor. Okay, nothing but when you are borrowing the capital, when you are framing a capital structure, you'll be borrowing the money either by issuing equity or debt or preference shares. Okay, and all these source of finance will not be free of cost. Everything comes by a cost. Okay, so there is no any free meals in this world. So when you are borrowing, either issuing equity or debt instruments, there is a certain cost you have to bear. That is called as cost of capital. Okay, so we have different types of cost of capital, that is cost of equity, and then cost of debt, then cost of, that's a weighted average cost of capital. When you add all the source of financing, when you add together and you calculate by assigning the weights, you'll get the weighted average cost of capital. So how to calculate cost of equity? Cost of equity, we normally use a CAPM approach. We use a CAPM approach, that is formula is risk-free rate of return plus beta into market risk premium minus risk-free rate. Okay, you can use this, and there are other models also there. We will be using a dividend growth model. Okay, so please go through all the formulas. You can refer any textbook of financial management. You'll come across all the formulas to calculate cost of equity. Please read and write down all the formulas. Okay, you can even use no growth approach and growth approach, dividend approach. Okay, for calculating the equity. And then we'll do one problem on this later. I have come across with that in the previous question paper. Then cost of debt, interest into 1 minus T tax rate. Then weighted average cost of capital, will calculate the weight for this particular equity component in the total capital, and then we'll multiply with the cost of equity plus again weight of debt in the overall capital will calculate, and then cost of debt. When you multiply and add, you'll get the weighted average cost of capital. Okay, it's also called as overall cost of capital. And cost of capital is very, very important because it's a very good criteria for capital budgeting. If you are if you want to select any particular proposal for investment, the IRR should not be less than the weighted average cost of capital. Okay, if not, what happens? It's better to not to accept the project. If IRR is more than the weighted average cost of capital, then you can accept the project. Then you will get a very good return. Okay, that is what you can use it as a criteria for capital budgeting. Second one, determining the capital mix in the capital structure decision, very, very important, because if your cost is increasing, you can try to change your mix. You can have less of equity, you can have more of debt, because debt is more cheaper source of capital. Then basis of evaluating financial performance, you can easily find out whether your financial performance is good or bad, okay, by looking at your cost of capital. And then basis for taking other financial decisions, other like your decisions like such as dividend policy, capitalization of profit, making rights issue, and working capital. Then factors affecting cost of capital. One is your market opportunities. If you have more market opportunities, then what happens? You may need more demand, you may need more money, but when the demand is more, what happens? Your cost you have to bear. And then preferences of capital providers. If more preferences are there, okay, you want to provide your so for example, savings. If people are saving more, then you can get more and more capital. Then importance of risk. Risk is very important. Higher the risk, higher would be the required rate of return, okay, for the investors. Then inflation also plays a major role when you are deciding the cost of capital. Here you can see the various sources of finance classification. Hope you are able to see it. Okay, source of finance, you can see one is based on time, then ownership and control. The third one based on source of generation. How we are going to generate this? So time we have long term, medium term, and short term. Based on ownership and control, we have owned and the borrowed, and then source of generation. One is internally you can generate by using equity share, because the equity shareholders will be called as internal owners. Then preference share capital and retained earnings or convertible debenture or venture fund or private equity. Then external, we have retained earnings, sorry, retained profits, which you are supposed to give as dividend, you are retaining it. And then reduction of working capital, then sale of assets, etc. That is external source of finance. So all these, I think you already know it. Please try to go through it. Okay. And then you can find out the different types of source of finance. Now we come to the very important topic called as budget and budgetary control. Budget, already know it's a written form of financial statement where you're going to record all the incomes and expenses. Okay, what you are expecting in the future. It's a estimation of financial performance of a particular department, a specific project, or a business, or an organization. And budgeting is nothing but the activity of preparation of budget is called as budgeting. Okay, and there are different types of budgeting. One is zero-based budgeting, where you start from the scratch. We're not going to compare with the previous year's budget, and traditional budgets where they used to prepare by using the previous year, okay, the changes and based on the inflation rate, consumer demand, and market situation. And the incremental budgeting where they use historical data, and then you have to give some increment. Maybe they'll increase 5%, 10% each factors, and you prepare budget. Then activity-based budget, you prepare a budget based on the each and every activity done in the operation. Okay, so types of budgets we come across: sales budget, cash budget. These are actually called as functional budgets: sales, cash, production budget, material budget, labor budget, factory overhead, distribution overhead, administration overhead. All these 1 to 8 are called as functional budgets. When I add all the functional budgets, I'll get the master budget. That is called the ninth one. Ninth is master budget. And then we have another two types of budgets called fixed budget and flexible budget. In fixed budget, where you're going to prepare a particular budget for a fixed output. Okay. And flexible budget, you're going to prepare for various outputs. Not only one output, you prepare for say 80% of output, 100% of output, or 60% of output. You prepare a various budget. It's called flexible. Okay. And budgeting methods, one is incremental budgeting and activity-based budgeting and value proposition budgeting and zero-based budgeting. What is incremental budgeting? Where they take the historical cost and they'll try to increase with the some percentage. Okay. So incremental budgeting takes last year's actual figures and adds or subtract a percentage of, okay, of the increment to obtain the current year's budget. It's a more common method for budgeting because it's simple and easy, and it's appropriate to use if primary cost drivers do not change from year to year. Then you can use this method. Second one, activity-based budgeting. It is a top-down budgeting approach that determines the amount of inputs required to support the targets or output set by the company. For example, a company sets an output target of $100 million in revenue. The company will need to first determine the activities that need to be undertaken to meet the sales target, and then find out the cost of carrying out these activities. Then they will prepare the budget. Then value proposition budget is really a mindset about making sure that everything that is included in the budget delivers value to the business. So value proposition budget aims to avoid unnecessary expenditures, although it is not a precise aimed at that goal, as our final budget option and zero budget option. Okay. So it is another where we are going to find out whether any of the expenditure, what they are doing, it is not creating any value to the company. They'll try to avoid that. Okay. And very important thing is zero-based budgeting. Many of the years I've seen many questions on this. Please understand, zero-based budgeting starts with the assumption that all departments' budgets are zero and must be rebuilt from the scratch. Managers must be able to justify every single expense no expenditure automatically okayed by the top management. Zero-based budgeting is very tight, aiming to avoid any and all the expenditure that are not considered absolutely essential to the company's success or profit operations. And this kind of bottom-up budgeting can be a highly effective way to shake things up. Okay, here the manager has to start preparing the budget from the scratch. He cannot use any of the previous year data. And whenever he is putting any expenditure, it has to be very, very clearly explained, and it should justify why this expenditure you need. Okay, then they have to prepare the zero-based budgeting. Hope you are understanding. I'm not, I have to go fast because of time constraint, but please stop me if anything you require, any doubt you have. And zero-based budgeting is best suitable for addressing the discretionary cost rather than essential operating cost. So to be very, very discerning when you are preparing this, it can be an extremely time-consuming approach. So many companies only use this approach occasionally. Okay, many companies doesn't use it because it takes a lot of time because it prepares from the scratch. Clear? So budgetary control is a process by which you prepare the budget. Budgets are prepared for future period and which is compared with the actual performance for finding out the variances. So once you prepare the budget using various approaches, okay, then you are going to compare this with the actual and then you find out the variance. Okay, like what we do in the standard costing. Okay, and the comparison of budgeted figures with the actual figures will help the management to find out the variance and take the corrective action. And there are different types of budgetary control. One is operation budget control. Usually firms will compare the performance of this budget with the actual performance on the monthly basis. In monthly comparison enables the organization to take corrective actions in more timely manner. It mainly covers all your operating expenses and incomes. Okay, we are going to prepare the budget. Second one, cash flow. Here you're going to compare only the forecasted cash inflows and cash outflows from various sources to the actual inflow and outflow. And then we're going to find out the variance. If there is any excess cash, then they try to find out which any idle cash is there. Then they'll try to invest somewhere to get a good return. Then expenditure budget control, budgeting control. This budgeting control covers only the capital expenditure like buying machineries, plant, building and everything. And this budget control helps the organization to help and plan and manage its capital expenditure. Okay, and this capital expenditure involves use sum of money because you already know use money will be involved, so that to be very, very careful when they are spending money for capital expenses. It becomes very important to take steps to ensure the firm makes only profitable investment at the right decision time. Okay, this you can see the summary of the capital budgeting control. So different types are operational budget, cash flow budget and capital expenditure budget. And steps is was to prepare the budget, compare with the actual, then you get the, then you correct the variances, take the action to correct the variance and in textbook. Then we come to very important topic, that is leverages. So what is leverage? The employment of an asset or source of funds of which the firm has to pay a fixed cost or fixed return. That is called as leverage. So what is leverage? Leverage is nothing but using the debt capital in your capital structure. Okay, that is called as leverage. So it generally refers to the using borrowed fund or debt so as to attempt to increase the returns to equity. So there are different types of leverages. One is called operating leverage, then financial leverage, and then combined leverage. So what is operating leverage? The fixed cost remains the same. The percentage change in operating income will be more than the percentage change in sales. This occurrence is called as operating leverage. So here the main deciding factor is your fixed cost. Whenever the company has a fixed cost, it is like a leverage. It is called operating leverage. So the company has to make use of this fixed cost very, very discretionarily. Because if you have a fixed cost, you cannot reduce it. Like for example, rent, you have to pay whether you produce or not the products in the factory. You have to pay the factory rent. So when you use it very efficiently, the operating leverage can be used for very good for increasing your profit. If not, it becomes a burden for the company. So how to calculate this? Contribution divided by EBIT. How do you calculate contribution? Sales minus variable cost. Contribution divided by EBIT. Okay. Please remember these formulas. Then financial leverage is nothing but trading on equity. One more name is called trading on equity, where financial leverage refers to the use of long-term fixed interest bearing debt and preference capital along with the equity share capital. It refers to the leverage or force applied on debt, and the benefit is reflected in the form of higher returns. Okay, so how to calculate financial leverage? EBIT divided by EBT. Okay, and then combined leverage, when you combine both financial and operating leverage, it is called combined leverage. Is a leverage which refers to high profits due to fixed cost. It includes fixed operating expenses with fixed financial expenses. Fixed cost you already know, and fixed financial expense nothing but your debt capital. When I have debt capital, I have to pay interest every year. That interest will be fixed. Whether company earns profit or not, they have to pay the interest. That is what it's called fixed financial expenses. Okay. So when you combine these two, you'll get the combined leverage. So you can see the formula here, how to calculate degree of combined leverage, degree of operating leverage into degree of financial leverage. Nothing but percentage change in EBIT divided by percentage change of sales will give me the operating leverage. Then the degree of financial leverage. When I combine these two, you can see here contribution divided by EBIT into EBIT divided by EBT, nothing but minusing the interest from that. When you cancel this, EBIT will cancel numerator and denominator. So the remaining part will be contribution divided by EBT. So please remember these formulas. Sometimes these formulas only come as a questions in the exam, net exam. EBIT and EPS analysis. This is very, very important. Here they want to find out how your capital structure is going to affect your earning per share. Ultimately, the company's main goal is what? Wealth maximization. The shareholders' wealth has to be maximized. So whatever capital structure you're using, they want to make sure that the earning per share should be maximum. That is what is called EBIT analysis. It is nothing but it's a tool of financial planning that evaluates various alternatives of financing a project. That means they're going to design a different capital structures and they're going to analyze and calculate the earning per share. And whichever gives the maximum earning per share, that is one of the profitable capital structure. Okay. Determining optimum capital structure. So EBIT, EPS analysis advantages in selecting the optimum mix of debt and equity. And this is emphasized on the relative value of EPS. This analysis determines the opportunity mix of debt and equity in the capital structure. It helps determine the alternative that gives the highest value of EPS, as I said earlier. Okay. Okay. So one more topic we have, two topics, last two topics, and it's called financial break-even point. So what is financial break-even? We know the general break-even point, that is in the economic terms. So what is financial break-even point? It's nothing but it's when a company is making no profit, no loss. Okay, that is the general break-even point or economic break-even point, beyond which the company makes a profit. In financial break-even is also a similar concept, but uses a different measures to arrive at the point. Okay, it is a point defining the level before the EBIT, that is earning before interest and tax. We call them as EBIT, at which the earnings per share of the company is equal to 0. That means in a given level of EBIT, the EPS should be 0. That is called as financial break-even point. Okay. So the point defining the level of break-even before interest and tax, that is EBIT, at which the EPS will become equal to 0. Okay. And this is the level of EBIT that equals the fixed financial cost for the company as well as interest on the debt and then preferred dividend and more. Because we calculate EPS only after deducting the fixed cost, then after deducting the interest and then even the preference dividend. Then only we get the EPS. After EPS only we will give the dividend to the equity shareholders. The minimum EBIT that a company should earn to meet its fixed commitments. That is what we get a calculation. When I come to know that this EBIT is making my EPS 0, that means this much is what they need to earn. That means they have to earn minimum, not maximum. Minimum this much they have to earn. That is earning before interest and tax after deducting your variable cost and fixed cost. Okay, analyzing this, anything that a company earns beyond this level or point is a profit to the shareholders. Okay. For calculating the financial break-even point, it is mandatory to include interest expenses and dividend on preference shares. These two we need to include, then we will calculate the break-even point. That is called financial break-even point. For the financial break-even point, we need to EBAT that could result in zero net income. As I said, no, when you calculate EBAT financial break-even point, your EPS will be zero. Okay. Therefore, 0 is equal to EBAT into 1 minus interest expenses into 1 minus tax rate minus preference dividend. Okay. When you do this, when this left hand side is already 0, when right hand side also becomes 0, that is your break-even point. Understood? So left hand side should be 0, your EPS should be 0, and right hand side should also be 0. That is nothing but your earning per share, earning before interest and tax into interest minus, and then your tax and even preferential dividend. If you minus, you will get that. So the formula you can see here, financial break-even point is equal to I. This is not 1, this is I. That is interest on bonds or debenture plus DP divided by 1 minus T. What is DP? Preferential dividends. Okay. So interest plus preferential dividend, when you add, that is your financial break-even point. Clear? Any doubt? So financial break-even point, you can find here, same thing I given the summary here. Formula is preferential dividend divided by 1 minus T plus interest rate, interest expenses. Okay. So there are two types. One is accounting break-even point, already you know, no profit, no loss, nothing but when your expenses are equal to your revenue. Okay. And here it helps to estimate the level of earnings at which the earning per share is equal. Yes, sorry, it is 0. EBAT is taken as earning for the purpose of its calculation. Okay. And then formula, I already know that it helps in calculating zero net income. Clear? I think we have come to the last topic, that is indifference level. Point of indifference refers to that EBAT level at which EPS remains the same irrespective of different alternatives of debt equity mix. Understood? So it is a nothing but point of indifference before refers to that EBAT level at which the EPS remains the same irrespective of the different alternatives of debt equity mix. It is a EBAT level beyond which benefits of financial leverage begins to operate with respect to EPS. In other words, the EBAT levels at which the EPS is same for two alternative financial plans is referred to as a indifference point. Okay. I have plan 1 and plan 2. When I calculate EBAT and EPS for a given EBAT, if I calculate EPS, the both should come same. Okay. If EPS remains the same irrespective of my EBAT, okay, that means plan 1 may have different capital structure and other one may have different capital structure. When I calculate EBAT for both and then I calculate EPS, when it comes equal, then it is called indifference level. The moment the company earns more than this EBAT, then it is profit margin. They get into profit. You can see here the formula to calculate the EPS. X minus IT into 1 minus T into PD, preferred dividend divided by S1. S1 nothing but number of equity share or amount of equity share capital under the alternative 1. S2 is for the second alternative. These are two alternatives. When you calculate, you should get same answer. Then that is called indifferent point. Okay. So I is interest under plan 1 and plan 2. Then T is interest rate and preferred dividend. Okay, given that. And E is your earning EBAT. X is your EBAT. Okay. So you can see here the indifference point where I'm having calculating the plan 1. This is your okay, the income that is for plan 2 and this is the plan 1. That means plan 1 is they're using only equity, plan 2 they're using debt, where these 2 points meet, where my EPS will be same, where I get the same EPS, then this is called as, in both the plan you can see here I'm getting around 1.5 or 2 EPS. When I'm getting same EPS, that is called as indifferent point. And even EBAT will be same for both of them. Got it? This is called indifference point. Is it clear? Any doubt, dear participants? You're able to follow me? Okay, thank you. Yeah, one more last topic, picking order theory. Picking order theory enumerates the preferable order of raising the finance normally followed by the companies. So please remember this. So these are the choices in order of preference for the company what they take. One is normally they go with the retained earnings if they have more retained earnings. If not, they go for non-convertible debenture. That means after the maturity, it will not get converted into equity share. That means they don't want to dilute the ownership. Then preference share. Then they go for hybrid securities like convertible debentures, okay, or the convertible bonds if it is a private company, convertible bonds for public company, and convertible debenture for the private enterprises, and then equity. This is the order which they go for the raising the finance for the company. Okay. Okay, so I have covered everything. All the topics I covered in the syllabus. Okay, but I couldn't go in depth. Really sorry for that because of the time constraint. I hope you got the glance. So please, now you can build on this. Please go home and read from the textbook. Okay, so today I thought we'll discuss the 2018 July question paper. Okay, so what I request is I will be giving you the question and the answer options. I want you to tell the answer. And don't worry, if it's a right or wrong answer, don't worry. I'll try to discuss the solutions with you. Okay. So you can see one question here. Indicate the correct answer, correct code from the following type of decisions to be incorporated within the financial decision. One is investment decision, financing decision, pricing decision, and profit distribution decision. So what is the right code? Is it A and B, or ABC, or ABD, or BCD? Please, I want all the participants to type the answer in the chat box. Please give me the answer. Is it 1, 2, 3, or 4? What is your answer? Is it code is 1, 2, 3, or 4? ABC, somebody is saying. Charu ma'am, that is wrong. Sujay sir, 2 is also wrong. Anybody? Please guess quickly. I think I already covered this in the beginning. Financial decisions. 3 decisions of a finance manager. 1 is also wrong. There are 3 decisions taken by finance manager. One is investment decision, financing decision, and dividend decision. Only these 3. Other one which is given is extra. So the third is wrong. Pricing decision is not financial manager's decision. Okay, so which is the code now? Which is the answer now? Third is wrong. C is wrong. So what is the code? Code is 3, correct. 3 is, that is A, B, and D. Investment decision, financing decision, and distribution of decision nothing but dividend decision. You have just given in the different way. Profit distribution nothing but dividend decision. Profit will distribute to whom? Shareholders. That is called dividend decision only. Okay. Yeah, we'll go to the next question. Any doubt, please chat in the chat box. Next one. Yeah, they'll write in a different way to confuse you. That's why it's called competitive exam. Hypothesis for capital structure is based on which code of the following assumption? Market are perfect, firms belongs to equal risk class, there is 100% dividend payout ratio, there are nominal corporate tax. To answer this, I'll tell you, you should know the assumptions of approach of capital structure. But still you can try. Please guess it. Please type your answers. You have tried, select the code 1, 2, 3, or 4. Again, here you can actually use your common sense. Even if you don't know assumption, you can use common sense. Answer is 4. No, 4 is not the right answer. Other participants, please don't feel shy. Anyways, I'm not giving any marks. Even the net exam also, there's no negative marking. If you do mistake also, don't worry now. But in exam, don't do the mistakes. Yeah, you can see the last one. What is the last one? It says there are nominal corporate taxes. What do you mean by nominal corporate taxes? There's nothing called as nominal corporate taxes. Okay, the corporate taxes are decided by the finance ministry, and whatever they decide, they have to pay. There's nothing called nominal or any this thing. We have a slab wise. Slabs are there, but there's nothing called nominal corporate taxes. Okay, so this D is wrong. So what will be your code? Code will be second one, A, B, and C. He's assuming markets are perfect. He's assuming that firm belong to a equal risk class and there is a 100% dividend payout ratio. Okay. Please read MM hypothesis and assumption. That's why I told assumptions of all the theory you should read. Okay. We'll go to the next one. 28th, indicate the correct code for the following two statements of assertion and reasoning. Assertion means they are telling very confidently something, and that's whatever they are telling may not be right or true, but sometimes it may be right, sometimes it may be wrong also. So you have to be very careful. Assertion and reasoning, and for the assertion they give you reasoning also. Why are they telling so confidently? So they'll give the reason. Sometimes both may be correct, sometimes one may be correct, one may be wrong. So we have to be very careful when choosing the code. Let me read the assertion. Investors in capital market now have higher inclination for investment in debentures. That means their investors are going more towards the debentures. What is the reason for that? Debentures have an active secondary market now. So please give me the code, which is the right answer. Whether assertion and reasoning both are correct or both are wrong, or one is correct, one is wrong. Code is 2. 2 is both are correct, and R is the right explanation for A. And R is not the right explanation. That is wrong. 2 is not the answer. Anybody else? Okay, let me tell you. See, investors obviously now they are going more towards the debenture, because debentures in capital market now have higher inflation because the debenture market is increasing. That means your secondary market is more active. More people are buying and selling debentures. Okay, so compared to equity, debentures are less risky because they have a hold on the company's asset. If company is shutting down, you can at least get a first preference to get your money. Okay, so that is why the debenture markets are increasing, and both are correct. So which is the combination? Combination 1 is correct. Both A and R are correct, and R is the right explanation. So the answer code is 1. Okay. Is it okay? Any doubt? Yeah. Next one, consider below mentioned statements and state the correct code for the statements. Here they are given two statements now. You should say whether these two statements are correct or both are wrong, or one is correct or another one is wrong. Okay, that is a true or false. The first one is a debt equity ratio of 2:1 indicates that for every 1 unit of equity, the company has raised 2 units of debt. And statement 2, the cost of floating an equity issue is lesser than the cost of floating a debt. Yeah, please take your time and understand the statements. In the chat box. False, both 1. Both are false. Okay, that's a wrong answer. See, let's look at the question. Debt equity ratio 2 is to 1. Okay, that means 2 is nothing but the debt and the 1 is equity. Indicates that every 1 unit of equity, the company has raised 2 units of debt. That is correct only. 2 is to 1 nothing but for every one debt, for every 2 debt, they have 1 equity. That is correct only. The statement 1 is true. Second, the cost of floating an equity issue is lesser than the cost of floating of debt. This is actually reverse. I told in the beginning of the class, right? In the class I was explaining when I was explaining theory, debt is more cheaper than equity. Floating an equity is more costly affair, okay? And floating debt is less cheaper. But here he has given reverse. He is given the floating of equity is lesser than the cost of floating debt. This is wrong. So what should be your answer? Yeah, now we are going to raise the fund by issuing debt, but you're going to pay them later. So what is the answer now? Yeah, somebody has already typed fourth option. Fourth option is correct. Sujay and yeah. Okay. So the answer is fourth is correct. Statement 1 is true and statement 2 is false. We'll go for the next one. Debt service coverage ratio. Debt service coverage ratio indicates which one of the following: effective utilization of assets, number of times fixed assets covers borrowed fund, excess of current assets over current liability, number of times surplus covers interest and installment of term loan. This is very easy. Only if you know the what is debt service coverage ratio. Which is the answer? Answer is yeah. Somebody is telling 4. 422 final. No. You can even type what the reason why you feel fourth is the right answer. Fourth is correct because the debt coverage ratio talks about how much you can cover your interest and your installment of the term loan. Okay, I think I show you the formula. I think I written, yeah, formula you can see here. Debt service coverage ratio is net operating income divided by debt service. Debt is nothing but interest in the lease payments and the principal repayment. What you are doing. Okay, so if you have more and more income, you can cover more and more debt you can repay, either interest or principal amount you can repay. So more you have income, more you can repay. That is what it is saying here. The number of times surplus covers interest and installments of the term loan. Okay, clear? That is the debt coverage ratio. Any doubt? So the answer is 4. 2 is wrong because number of times fixed assets cover borrow interest, wrong because here in the formula there is no fixed assets. It is net operating income divided by debt services. That's what I'm telling you. Please read all the formulas. Try to understand the concept behind each formula and the standard ratio for each formulas. Okay. Yeah. Next is one more question we have. Authorized capital of company is 5 lakhs. 40% of it is paid up. Then loss incurred during the year is 50,000. Accumulated loss carried from last year is 2 lakhs. The company has a tangible net worth of option 1, 2 lakhs, option 2, 2.5 lakhs, option 3, 50,000 minus negative, and then 7 lakhs 50,000. It's a very easy and easy one. You can just use the general knowledge, general concept of finance you understand. You can calculate this. Please calculate and tell me. You can take a paper and pen and calculate. What is the tangible net worth? Yeah, the answer is minus 50,000. Dr. Vidya has given. That is correct. That's a right answer. I think I have done the answer here. You can see there. See, 5 lakhs they have, and out of this 5 lakhs, 40% only is paid up. So 40% of 5 lakhs, if we calculate, will get how much? 2 lakhs. And then they have loss incurred during the year is 50,000. So this 50,000 you have to minus. Then accumulated loss carried from the last year is 2 lakhs. The total there are two losses. One is 50,000 and another one is 2 lakhs. So 2.5 lakhs is a loss. So you minus from 2 lakhs, you'll get minus 50,000. 2 lakhs minus 50,000 minus 2 lakhs, you'll get minus 50,000. Okay. Are you satisfied with the answer? Yes or no? You understood the logic? Yes, yeah. Okay, so it's very, very general. Actually, very, very general question only. One thing you should know the basic finance calculation, you can get that. Next one, which one of the following is related to control function of the financial manager? Okay, so what are the, there is no much formula for that, I don't think, but you can just take the normal, just take the profits and take the capital and minus the loss, because we know that no, when the after preparing the financial income statement, that is your P&L account, whether you get profit or loss will transfer to the capital. Yes or no? So we'll minus, if it is a loss from the capital, we'll minus. If it is profit, we'll add to capital. If it is a sole trading company, if it is a what is that? If it is a joint stock company where they have shareholders, it will go to the P&L appropriation account. Then we will deduct all the capital expenditures like dividend distribution and income tax payment, everything, and then the surplus will again be added to the capital. Okay, the surplus will be added to the net worth. Okay, so that is what is the logic used here. So capital, then your deficits are surplus. If you deficit, you have to deduct. Okay, that's a logic here. There's no any formula for that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. You can know the, please look at the joint stock company for how to prepare the sheet. Okay. First they'll prepare the income statement, then they'll prepare P&L appropriation account, and then they'll prepare balance sheet. Okay. That is the concept they used here. Next one, 90th question of July 2018 UGC question paper. Which one of the following is related to the control function of the finance manager? Okay, which comes under the controls of finance manager? To negotiate with banks for the loan, to analyze variances between standard cost and actual cost, to estimate the future cash flows from a proposed project, to advertise the public issue of the finance. Which is the answer? Answer is 3, estimation of cash flows from proposed project. No, that's not the answer. Please remember, the key word in this question is what? Key word is control. The key word is control. Here estimation only, is not controlling anything. Is he controlling by preparing the future cash flows from a project? No. Yeah, 2 is the right answer, because here is doing something controlling. What is he controlling? He is actually doing analyzing the variance between standard cost and actual cost. And once a variance he has calculated, he'll try to control that variance. Okay. For example, your standard cost and actual cost is comparing, and your actual cost is more than the standard cost. For example, standard cost is 100 rupees. That means you have to manufacture within 100 rupees of product, but you have manufactured using 120 rupees. The variance is 20 rupees. That means you use 20 rupees more than the standard. And now what is his job? Now you have to control the production process in such a way that your cost is reduced by 100 by 20. That means your at least your standard cost should be equal to your actual cost. Got it? That is what is doing some controlling here. Here negotiation with the bank is not control. Estimation of future cash flow is not control. Advertisement in the public issue is not a control. So please understand, in every question there will be some keywords. Please try to understand the keywords, then select your options. Okay. So it's a very simple question, but if you don't know the keywords, you will end up doing wrong. Okay. You'll do a mistake in that. Clear? Any doubt? Shall we go to the one more question, last question before we wind up? Time is also coming to end. Yeah. So please read the question, very important, and then go to the options. Don't directly go to the options. Don't jump. Sometimes they'll ask in the question only whether it is true or false, whether it is right or wrong. So please understand the question, then you answer it. Okay. Don't be overconfident when you go for exam. Okay, one more question we'll see before we wind up. A firm is currently currently earning rupees 50,000. Okay, that means your profit is 50,000. The earnings of the company 50,000. Okay, so not profit is earning. Okay, and its one share has a present market price of 175 rupees. That means the equity share is trading now in the market. The price is 175 rupees. And it has 5,000 shares outstanding. Okay, he has 5,000 shares outstanding. The earnings of the company is expected to remain stable. That means they're going to have the same earnings, and it has a payout rate ratio of 100%. Okay, the cost of equity is what? So please tell me the answer. You have to calculate the cost of equity.